great. Thank you so much.
So can we have thumbs up again? Just one more thumbs up for recording. We're all good?
Everybody agrees to recording? Okay, great. Perfect. I'm sure that there'll be some other people that'll be checking in, and that will be a difficulty. Beth, you've raised your hand already, so let me find where you are. Beth, I've unmuted you. Go ahead. You have a question? I don't know why your pad won't unmute.
Hello?
Hello, Beth? Yes. Yep.
Yeah, no, I just didn't know how to give give you permission.
Oh, okay. Got it. Thank you.
I didn't know how.
You've done well. Thank you. All right. So this is the first of a series of case studies where I want to talk about some of the work I've been doing with some of my clients. And over the years, we've had such a way of defining ourselves in the Feldenkrais method as a method for helping people with movement and recover their physical integrity, recover their ability to interact with the environment with a quality of assurance, self-assurance, a sense that they could move with good posture, with real ease, that they could find their way into more comfort for themselves in movement. But that's not the only population of people that we necessarily work with. And I wanted to spend a few moments talking about some of the kinds of things that we can do. And I wanted to kind of make this into a question and answer kind of process for us as I go through this case study. Because I think that there's, when you look at Moshe's first book, Body and Mature Behavior, and we look at the question of mature behavior, there's a statement in the book that when he's talking about Freud's idea of what a cure of neurosis is, and he says a cure of neurosis is the state in which one, if you could imagine, the person's demeanor no longer expresses anxiety or insecurity. And that's a pretty profound statement. I mean, that would be a state of maturation for most of us if we really to be able to be in the place of that kind of composure where we weren't maintaining within our muscular habit, within ourselves, the tension that goes with the way that we've come to know ourselves, not only in gravity, but in
can people please mute themselves? Or Jeff, can you mute everybody?
I will go through and mute. I'll mute everybody again. Okay, there we go. So I mean, we understand the travails that people go through and what they bring to us. Ruby is a client of mine, has been for the last, she started about 3 months ago. She'd been in an absolutely horrific automobile accident. And she had been through EMDR, she had been through several other processes, but she was absolutely fear-stricken to sit in the passenger seat of a car. And when she came in, she was referred to me by a woman who's I don't know, she's kind of a medical intuitive, I think, but she didn't have a way to help this person. So she was referred to me, and when she came in and she told me her story, and she was, anytime that, as we get better and better in this work, we become more and more able to attend to really, really fine details in a person's affect, in the way that they carry tension in the face. It's like we would be really, really good profilers in Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv. And most of you haven't probably ever been to the airport in Tel Aviv, but what happens is that you sit in long lines, and then all of a sudden before the flight, a group of people come walking through and they ask you an endless number of questions about what you've been doing. And they're looking for your facial tics and your facial expressions, or if you're a gambler, your tells as to whether or not you're telling the truth or not. And so we actually have a very, very high ability as we study this work. And so every time that she mentioned to me that she was I of course asked her a lot of questions about herself, but she mentioned to me that every time that she even thought of the idea of the front seat of a car, you could watch her literally, if you could imagine a person closing in on themselves and watching the way that a person would move into the kind of protection to protect them from experiencing something that they absolutely don't want to experience. So I spent a lot of time talking with her before we, and of course talking with her as part of the lesson, because I'm asking her a lot of questions. But she's a professional woman. She's in her mid-50s. Her expertise is she travels a lot. She sells medical products, and so she's in a lot of meetings with a lot of people. She travels a great deal. This process of not being able to be in the passenger seat of a car, and that included the back seats of cars. So for her to fly into a city and then to do the work that she had to do, she was completely limited in her ability to do work. And so in the very beginning, I asked her if she could imagine what the passenger seat of her car looked like. And she literally, almost in a state of revulsion, almost pulled back into herself and almost completely withdrew. So that's the sort of the state that I began working with her with. So what does this woman need? And so I'm going to open the question up for a few moments. In your idea, as a Feldenkrais practitioner, when we're dealing with someone who's in these sorts of states and these sorts of conditions, because people come to us who've experienced significant trauma. Now we have to understand, in a sense, what trauma is. And from my perspective, and from many people's perspective, trauma is a situation in which you don't have the resources to handle. There are many times when people have been injured in the past, and they've maintained their self-preservation, their self-protection, their defenses, their sense of all the different ways that they compensated around the event. Normally, those terms, those things are thought of as negative, that the person has had a negative experience. It's not common for people to think, wow, what a brilliant thing you've done to build the protection that you've built relative to the experience. A person who has limited resources and doesn't have the means to meet the experience in such a way that the experience is shed easily, they must develop some form of self-preservation, some form of protection, and that becomes a part of the way that they know themselves and hold themselves in their habit. I think the woman established an absolutely brilliant pattern within herself. And so the question then becomes, how can we help her with what it is that she already knows how to do? She had the brilliant means to find a way to do something that provided her with a sense of safety in a really, really difficult situation. Yeah, that's not a small thing. In fact, it's a brilliant thing. Yeah. So if you were to work with this person, what would be some of your ideas about how you would help her develop the kind of quality that she would need to be with in order to face this very, very difficult and painful situation that she's in? How would you do that? What would be some of your ideas? Let's have a couple people just join into a little conversation. All you have to do is raise your hand and I will unmute you. Nobody's jumping in here. Is it something? Okay, Beth, go ahead. Let me just, I've unmuted you. Go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
Just to support, I'm assuming you're talking about physical for the moment, concepts about what she's already doing. You know, for example, I think about typical things that happen following a car accident, you know, the stiffening in the neck, for example, of supporting that physically and not immediately demanding or even inviting change or differentiation in the neck, because that would be frightening. So, you know, other things that pop into my head pretty immediately are to work with the breath to help just calm her in general. And of course, therefore, you would have to look at where she is with her breathing at that time.
Okay. The first term is how it is that you could work with her and give her a sense of being more calm. Okay. What else? Someone else have an idea that they would, I mean, Anna, just go ahead, let me unmute you. Go ahead, jump in for a moment, please.
Okay, well, I would, I could sympathize with her to not want to be in the passenger seat of somebody she doesn't know who's driving. I mean, has had the trauma, so I would understand that not knowing who the person was who's driving could put you in a state of anxiety. I think for a lot of people it can be quite anxiety ridden. So I would question her, is there anyone, any situation, anyone driving, is there someone that she feels okay with when they are driving?
Even her husband was unsafe to be with.
So there's nobody.
She's absolutely petrified to be in the front seat of the car. Or
And on the back seat. But so I would guess I would just keep asking, like you said, you asked a lot of questions, which I think is really great. I would want to keep asking questions. Like, she travels a lot, so how is she in a train, in a plane, or is it just specifically the car?
Yes, good question. In a car, she's able to be in a plane. She can be in a train. She can be in a bus. She can be in any of those vehicles. It's very specific to being in a car.
Maybe she needs just to be blindfolded.
I'm not sure that would work.
No, just carried and put. Well, it seems like if she's okay in a plane and a train, and maybe you just have to dress up the car. Make it like a train.
Let's see if we can't become a little bit more sophisticated than that.
So what if she's driving?
She can drive. She got to my house. Driving for her is not a problem. Being in the passenger seat is what's difficult. Okay, Kathleen. Go ahead.
Okay. Is my voice coming over it?
It is, yeah.
Oh, okay. Feldenkrais said, know what you do. So I'd look at the patterns that she's used to protect herself in these situations and start working with that to help her become aware of what she's doing and feel what her reaction is, so that later on she can start playing with going to other, get a range within that, and then going to other possible options to react in those situations.
Cool, great. Someone else want to raise their hand before we, yeah. There you go, Marianne. Just a second, you're muted still. I don't seem to be able to unmute you. You'll have to try to unmute yourself.
There we go.
There you go.
Start in a parked car.
Starter in a parked car. Okay. Yeah, that's a strategy that took place about the third session.
Okay.
This is good. Okay.
Okay.
Very nice. Russ, go ahead. I can't hear you, Russ. Still not hearing you. Can you hear me? Okay, so you're still trying to figure out how to get your voice to work. All right. All right, let's have Kathleen go ahead one more time. And I'll just
Okay.
go ahead.
Doing it. I was just going to mention for people, the first time you unmuted me, I had to then, it just allowed me to unmute me. It didn't automatically do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. All right. So let's see if we can't take this thinking a little bit deeper. So I'm interested when I work with people in a profound sense of composure. Now, what does it mean to be deeply composed? And you could ask yourself this. You could ask yourself this from the point of view of what would it be for you if your face was to, and if the attention that you maintain in yourself of anxiety and insecurity was simply washed out of you in a moment. And your breath was simply available to you in a way that it's like you're collected within yourself as a whole. Yeah? And in a place of being in a place of a pre-verbal place, so that the lesson that I gave to her, the lessons I gave to her was first and foremost, yes, the idea of bringing her to a state where her breath becomes calm, but something really significantly much deeper than that. Now, I think that we have to think back in terms of child development for a moment. And I just want to take a moment and just talk for a moment from a point of view of child development. When we go back, and I've got some information from Roger Russell, and he's looked at some of the research that Daniel Stern did on the core sense of self. And there are 4 experiences. A core sense of self is when people have an integrated sense of themselves, that they're distinct and coherent within themselves with a control over their own actions. They own their own affect, and they have a sense of continuity, a sense of other people, and a sense of being distinct relative to other people. This is a particular stage that a baby goes through and develops between the ages of 2 and 9 years old. And there are 4 experiences that constitute the core sense of self. The first one is self-agency. In other words, you have a sense of authorship of your own actions, that sense of volition, a sense of being able to self-generate your own movement, and a sense of consequence for the actions. Like if your eyes are closed and you run into the wall, you understand that when your eyes are closed and you run into a wall, you understand that something's going to happen with that. Self-coherence, having a sense of being whole with clear boundaries. A sense of self-affectivity, experiencing patterns of inner qualities of feelings that belong to a sense of self, and a sense of self-history, a sense of enduring, a place of continuity with the past. Now this becomes a little bit academic at this point, but the point is that this place of this agency within yourself is a pre-verbal place. It's a place where when a person has this core sense of self, there's a particular quality that the person has that afterwards, anything that arises out of that into the future can become a part of their behavior. I think we have to, and this is not hypnotherapy, this is not reducing back, this is not a regression, this is not something like of that order. The question is how can I bring about a lesson that creates the conditions where a person becomes profoundly quiet within themselves? Now, the first and foremost that we have to do in order for a person to become quiet, we can do all the things that we know, but from my point of view, absolutely, and this is part of Moshe's brilliance, is that and Freud's brilliance. One of the things that Freud did was he took people's feet off the floor so that their anti-gravity musculature could be quiet, so that they could be open to free association. Feldenkrais took that idea from Freud, I'm sure, and produced the state in which when you bolster a person, that person has a sense that their muscle.
Your sound just went off.
Jeff, yeah, your sound went off.
How's that?
It's good.
My
Jeff,
back?
you're
Good.
all right.
Okay.
It went.
Thank you.
Two things. It went off right as you're you're bolstering somebody on the table, and also
Right.
if you give me a co-host, then I could help on the mute and unmute when people.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Let me just hang on one second, everyone. I think I just made Lila. Why do I have Lila on here twice? So I'm going to make. Okay. Okay. So good. I have to close these things up now. Okay. Thank you for your patience. There's a way in which we enter into a lesson with profound not doing. A profound sense of quiet. A profound sense of listening. A profound sense of not trying to help a person organize themselves for function. A way in which when we touch someone and we listen intently to them, in the very nature of the ways that they have supported themselves, we can take over the work for them when they're bolstered in such a way that the listening to them invites them to listen inside of themselves. Move their attention into a very profoundly deep and distinct inner quality of listening. Now, that's true, and that's the very nature of what our Feldenkrais method offers. When a person is engaged in such a way that they're paying distinct attention to small details, it begins to modulate their affect. It helps them with their limbic system. They become internally quiet because they can't sense the details if they're noisy. it modulates their thinking mind. Their mind becomes quiet because they're listening to distinctions. My job is to listen, help them listen to themselves listening. Now, generally speaking, when we look at the way that a person is organized after an event, the patterns of self-preservation and protection, in fact, are profoundly, there's a tension that they maintain in every single pore of themselves. So where do you start? In this case, with Ruby, I started with her lying in such a way that her feet were close to me, so that I could simply lift the back of her calves and hold them, so that I could simply bring my hand between the space between her heel and her Achilles, so that I could hold her heel in my hands. And if you hold a person's heels in their hands, I don't know the name of it, but I'm pretty sure that there's a kind of a reflex in which the person has a sense that they're profoundly supported. How many lessons do we do where you're tap, 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 tapping? And the reason for the tapping is to give you a sense that you sense your own bones. Yeah. So if we move out of all the muscular habit and we move out of all the muscular tension and we hold a person in such a way that they just begin to feel the sense of their own skeleton. If I touch them in such a way that as I begin to touch them and from the sole of their foot and just provide the tiniest change in the innervation in their ankles, so that the whole way in which their ankle begins to become engaged. You know, what do I mean by engaged? They're proprioceptively, they're not withdrawn, but slightly paying attention. As soon as the awakeness, as soon as the proprioception within their legs and in their hips begins to become awake, the sensation that they have is that the force of the movement can be through their skeleton. And as soon as the force is entered into their skeleton, and if you can support them with the slightest touch in such a way that the force through their skeleton brings them to the place, the reflex, the support into their breath, they move deeply into a quiet breath. Their diaphragm begins to open. It's not possible for me to show that here today because I don't have anybody here on the camera. And I don't have someone, but it's something I would be happy to show in one of these sessions. I'll do that. There's a particular quality when you touch a person through their skeleton that if you watch really closely, you'll see their diaphragm very, very subtly open in such a way. And if you're doing the Alexandrian eye lessons that Moshe is talking about, he's always talking about breathing in such a way that there's no particular activity in the chest and no particular activity in the diaphragm. You're doing nothing that you know to breathe. That the diaphragm just simply seems to expand and contract and contract and decontract and expand and contract. And there just becomes this particular quality of floating. Now, as that progression begins to take place in the lesson, what begins to happen, and as the force passes through and the diaphragm is supported and the breath begins to become clear, there's a profound change that takes place in the neck. In other words, from what I understand, when you provide this particular quality of support, the flexors, the tendency for the reflexes in the neck for flexion are inhibited, and leading a person to the sense that their extensors are engaged. That means they become lifted through their skeleton. Now, what happens when we're in a traumatic event? What happens when you're in a state where you need to protect yourself? You're certainly not going to be in a state where you're open. The state you're going to be in is, even if you appear normal to the public, there's an internal tension that has to do with anxiety and insecurity. It's a particular tone in the diaphragm. It's a particular tone that particularly affects, I've used the word particularly a lot, haven't I? That affects the tonic musculature, the very nature of the way that we organize ourselves to to maintain ourselves in space, in gravity. We over-tonify ourselves. So the question is how can we help a person to, with touch, through ourselves, to provide a clear length through the skeleton that invites the diaphragm to be free, and for the flexion in the neck to be inhibited so that the head becomes able to float in such a way that they sit and they begin to have a sense that they come to a quality where the movement within themselves, you don't have to even touch their neck, you don't have to touch their head, you don't have to touch their shoulders. You just simply can provide for them this moment in which they have a sense that there's some solid understanding that's passing through them. Yeah? Yeah, go ahead, Beth. Go ahead.
Clear, I think I fixed it. Just to be clear, you're still speaking of this effect being from the support at the heels and the ankle, yes?
Yes, from the support at the heels of the ankle, or a slight change in the direction of how you place your hand and move through the skeletal structures of the foot into through the talus and into the lower leg and into the knees, so that the connection into the leg.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it deserves some study, and perhaps with one of the other case studies, I can show a little bit on that. Okay. So when Ruby got up after the first session, and I saw to it that when she sat up, that her feet were profoundly placed on the floor. That the work that I'd done with her feet and her legs, and she sat up, and if you help a person sit just so their skeleton supports them really, really well, they can't help but have a profoundly deep breath. And it's a funny thing. The person can't lean forward. They have to find a way in their sit bones. They have to have a force that comes from the ground up and through them. They have to use the ground forces in themselves. They can't be sagging in themselves. They can't be falling. They have to be able to use the ground forces in such a way that it's as if they're lifting up and through themselves. Any degree of falling, any way that a person falls into themselves, leads to a stoppage of this quality. You can find out this quality for yourself just with this simple exercise, just for the moment. Just sit up for just a moment and come to the edge of your chair and begin to lift yourself in the best way that you know at this moment, as if to lift yourself away from the floor, as if you're coming from the floor up and through your head, and find the precise moment that when you have the clearest lift, that you find the corners of your mouth smiling. There's a particular quality that if you lift through yourself to the top of your head and you watch something begin to change in your diaphragm, it doesn't mean to stand. It means just simply to sit and lift as if you're coming up into the top of your head. What do you do to bring yourself to a state where your entire self smiles? How do you turn on an entire smile within yourself? Every pore of yourself, between your toes, between your fingers, in your joints, under your neck, at the back of your spine. How do you bring yourself to the place? The smile, just like learning is inherent within us, joy is inherent within us. It has to be uncovered. How do you now? What would you do to frown? How far do you sink into yourself to begin to frown? Or to go into a state of sadness? Can you float on the verge between smiling and frowning? Can you watch for yourself just this moment, at this micro moment between smiling and frowning? Can you watch internally what happens to your diaphragm and to the sense of support if you begin to fall into yourself towards a frown? And what happens when you begin to lift again? It's not done by pressing with your feet against the floor. It's lifting through yourself. Can you find the corners of your eyes beginning to lift? The corners of your lips? Something in the way that your head begins to lift and your eyes and head begin to float on the horizon slightly differently. Yeah? So working with this woman, it was in this state, this particular kind of regal open state, where she was not bound by the physical dimensions that she was used to. This quality of openness that and this pre-verbal quality that she hadn't attached any particular meaning to. Let me just go back for just a second. One of the things that we know, or I certainly know in working with people, is that whenever they come into my office and they begin to tell me a story about their experience, the first thing that I notice is that they always tell me the story as if it's a first-person experience, as if they're still in the story. You can watch it. It's as if they're reliving the experience as they tell it. Yeah? And of course, in the retelling, and we know about this from functional MRIs, that more of the brain is involved in telling the story than the actual event itself. And the telling of the story grooves even more deeply the patterns of self-protection and self-preservation into the person. Yeah? The person in telling the story re-injures themselves in the very telling of the story. So we have to bring them to a state where dimensionally, it's like they're not bound by the dimension and the contraction that the story gives them. They have to have another sense of what it's like to be open. Now, as soon as this woman was open in this particular way, I said, I'm pretty sure that you can imagine the car seat in your car, the passenger seat in the car from here. And she said, yeah, I can. And I said, and you can imagine it without detracting from the quality you're in. And she said, yes, I can. That's the first beginning step. I could have her sit at one end of the table as if she was driving and turn to look as if she was seeing the passenger seat, without her losing this, what I call this sense of composure. Yeah. Now, so this is, I think, very, very important for us as practitioners, is to recognize that we have profound tools for helping people with this kind of emotional dignity. Now, I didn't recommend to her that she get into the passenger seat of the car at that point in time. She came back 2 more times, and she had gotten to the place with each session that she could gradually imagine herself being in the passenger seat. And so one day I did walk her up to the car, and I opened the passenger seat door, and I live on a cul-de-sac, and I said, you know, I'm pretty sure at this moment you could hop in the car and I could drive you all the way around the cul-de-sac and come back. Completely in a non-threatening way, because obviously there's no traffic and my cul-de-sac is on a very private part of the city. And so it would have been to drive up 100 yards and turn around and come back. Now, she could imagine that. I didn't push it. I just said, sink into it and enjoy it. Yeah? Now, I did this with her one more time, and then she was going to go on a trip to Hawaii. Now, her practice was to ride in the car with her husband, and the roads that she lives on, she lives in a town not far from her, but it's a windy double-lane road between here and there. And so she came back to me, and she was, quote, triggered by the taillights of the cars in front of her. And this is where this lesson begins to become really intriguing. Yeah? And it has a lot to do with what we really, really know well in the Feldenkrais method. Now, triggered is a funny kind of a word, and it's not a word I particularly like. It's another one of the T words. I don't like the word trauma so much, and I don't like the T word triggered so much, even though they're used in many, many venues. Triggered basically means that if someone pulls the trigger on a gun, that you can't unpull it. If a bullet's been shot, you can't unshoot it. It means that someone's relationship to the environment, that the environment has caused a reaction within you that you have literally no capability of being with other than to go into the reaction. Yeah, it's no different than any other habit. And we know a lot about suspending habits, but we don't know so much about suspending habits with clients like this. Yeah. Now, here's where I think the lessons got really, really interesting. This is a woman, she's a professional woman. She comes to me and every single day, her makeup is perfect. Absolutely perfect. And she's told me the story that she's been triggered by the taillights. Now, if she's been triggered by the taillights, it means that she's had a reaction that's occurred before her ability and resources to be able to respond to the moment that rather than react. And we're dealing here with microseconds, and I know that. But this is a woman who's skilled. I said to her, look, every single day you sit in front of the mirror and you put your makeup on and you put your makeup on and you assure that every single time you put your makeup on, you put it on perfectly. Yeah. And she takes, it's artistry what she does. Yeah. And I says, there's not a moment that you aren't attending to the details of what you're doing. Then I said, is there anything else in your life where you attend to such details? Moment by moment. What we learn to do in awareness through movement, moment by moment, is attend to the very beginning of a movement, the formation of a habit, the muscular habit, the way that the entire organism, the organization begins to appear. And if we can suspend that, then we have the moment, that moment by which we can invent a new motor plan. Yeah? So she said, I'm really a good cook. And I say, what is it that is your favorite thing to do with cooking? She says, my favorite thing to do with cooking is to taste the food I'm preparing and to notice the spices. And to alter the spices because I cook every single meal. I invent every meal. I don't use recipes. So I'm continually looking for flavor profiles that I can taste, and I continually am working to modulate the flavor profiles. I said, now there's two things that you do perfectly. Is there anything else that you do perfectly? She says, I'm really, really good at organizing business meetings to see to it that the needs of the people in the meeting are really, really well taken care of. I said, you have three things that you do well. How do you do each of them well? I do things well in these moments because I pay close attention to what I'm doing. Yeah. So now what do you think her homework is? She's in the lessons. I'm giving her FI lessons. The lessons, now my job in the lessons is to give her more and more capability of paying attention to the details of the lesson. I give her little bits of homework in the lessons. I give her little bits to pay attention to. Notice as you initiate this movement, and I ask her to make a little movement. Notice as you initiate this movement, where does the movement begin? How does it begin? I'm using the lessons now as a teaching vehicle so that she becomes even more used to the idea of paying attention to details. I don't need to go into the details of the lessons, but each of the lessons provides her with a sense that she's more capable of finding better and better support within herself, more of a sense of composure, more of a sense that she's whole, bringing elements of herself together. You can imagine any kind of lesson that you want to do in order to that, but it's a question of what is the point of the lesson to bring this woman to the place where she can sit in the car before she goes to Hawaii. So her homework then is to have her husband take her for a drive where there's more traffic. And in so doing, to be in a state that she's connected to because of the lessons, because she has the sense of composure, to leave, to get into the car, be with herself, find the sense of composure before she starts, and then pay attention moment by moment by moment by moment to what's taking place in the environment, to discover if, as she's riding in the environment, if she can anticipate when the lights are going to come on in the car, and whether or not within herself she needs to react to the lights, or whether she can see that she's, and sense within herself that she's still composed and safe. Yeah. So we take what we know, this whole process of awareness and movement, and take it down into smaller and smaller and smaller details in the lesson, and provide it so that the person then finds the resources within themselves to find the means for themselves to be able to be in the environment, to be in the moment in such a way that they can keep this quality of composure, this quality of support through their skeleton, this sense of tonic ease, the sense that they're not overly engaged to support themselves in the need for protection, to find out truly whether they're safe or not. That's my lesson. That's my story with Ruby. Yeah. Let's have a few questions and a few ideas and see if does it make sense to work in that way. As a Feldenkrais practitioner, could you work with someone using this story and some of these ideas in the story? Could you begin to use this in a way that would be useful for some of the people that you're working with that come in, who then they themselves are maintaining defensiveness or self-preservation? And again, remember, these are absolutely brilliant strategies for their self-preservation, and they won't give it up until there's a profound sense of something that's better for them. Yeah? So we have to be able to provide lessons that give them that sense of internal strength, that sense of internal readiness, that sense of availability, that sense of dimension, that sense of whole, that sense that they're open rather than closed and shutting down in order to protect themselves. Yeah, Jane, please. I got you, I think. I don't know why I'm not able to unmute today.
Yeah, I've got to unmute myself after you unmute me. But
yeah, thank you.
I was just wondering, does the person to be able to get them into that state, like, you know, I think in a couple of lectures back, you said that you know, you get a lot of people who the wives bring them, like, and you have trouble, you know, transforming them or whatever. But do they have to have a sense that, like, I really want to overcome this, or like, I've been told I should overcome that? If you have a person like that, can you have the same effect on them?
No,
that's my.
I don't believe so. I believe that unless you're really, really clever and you've found a way to engage their curiosity, and you provide something in the beginning of the lesson that will engage their curiosity. I had a person brought to me not long ago, and at the end of the lesson, he was kind of like, you didn't even find my pain. and I was, and there was really no interest whatsoever and no reason for the person. It was a Christmas gift that had been given to him by a well-meaning relative.
I know, like, I get, well, I don't get, but like, I see just through my self-exploration, and I walk around and I see all these people like crunched over into incredible postures. Right. And it's like, why do they want to walk like that? You know, sort of like, they never, especially like family, like as people get older. And I think in Japan, there's like a tendency, like when you're old, you have this like really bent over posture. And it's like, you never used to walk like that. Why is it necessary for you to walk like that now? It's like, and I can do something to maybe like relieve, you know, the stress in your back or whatever, to make you, you know, stand upright. And I did that once with my mother-in-law. She has this incredible bent over posture, and I sort of worked as my limited ability. I worked on her back, and for the first time in about 3 months, she stood up straight. But within the next 3 minutes, she was back into what she knew. And it's sort of like, and it's like, she just doesn't want to change, you know?
I think that's a longer conversation. It's not that she doesn't want to change, it's that she doesn't know how to change.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
And
so I bring that to that person.
Right. This was a woman who was desperate. right? She was desperate. And she was referred to me by a person who I've helped considerably, a person who had a very bad fall off of a horse and is once again writing really, really well. And so, this person who referred her she has real respect from the people that she works with over the years. So I had a really good referral in this case. And so, so she was a person that was a very good candidate to work with. And she came in open and curiosity and able to be with I mean, she's, you know, in the business field, you have to live with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of complexity. Yeah. So she was very adept at that. Yeah. I mean, her whole style of cooking is about complexity. And so it's really interesting when you start to look into a person's life and ask them, what do they do well? And to give them kudos for the really brilliant process that they used at the time. At the time, they do the very best they can do. There's absolutely no reason whatsoever for that person to detract or to denigrate themselves, to use some form of anger or something against themselves for something that it was the only thing that they had available to them at the time. Yeah. And so to have a person understand with a sense of appreciation, wow, wasn't that a really profoundly good thing that you did for yourself at that moment? And have them move to the other side of the coin, which is not to be hard on themselves because they can't improve, but to give themselves credit for what it was they did do. And now let's take that which you do really, really well, that you've always done all your life, that you know perfectly. And then let's begin to bring that capability, that internal sense of being able to learn, bring it forward. Yeah. And to utilize that. She's doing really extraordinarily well. She comes in now and she looks very regal. And she comes now because she enjoys the lessons.
Another question too is, so like, okay, she seems to have overcome her fear of riding in the passenger seat. So is it necessary?
She has not actually.
All right.
She recognizes very clearly that the fear is there and she has another way of being with it.
Right.
Right.
But
the incident isn't going to go away. Right. So and it's still a relatively new incident. So it's going to take a long time before it really recedes really deeply into the past. Her sense of being connected to herself is clear enough that she can withstand what begins to arise within her without becoming reactive. She can catch it as it comes.
Right. And does she need to like continue to take lessons to keep that ability, or again, you know, if she doesn't take a lesson for like, you know, a few months, will she revert back into what she knows? Like that might be.
Yeah. Isn't that a lovely question? I mean, the question is, you know, the gravitational field that she was in with this profound sense of fear of being in the passenger seat with all of its reflections. At this point in time, she's more or less transcended the field. She's orbiting in a new orbit. Will the orbit decay and will she be pulled back into the fear? Would something else happen to her that she would end up reacting again and taking her back into that? It's quite likely, or it's quite possible. But for the time being, is she developing enough of a sense of herself that she can actually take an orbit that continues to move further and further away from the event, and the event simply becomes a part of the fabric of her life, not something that she has to continually to react to, but she actually can use it as a source of wisdom and fulfillment for herself. Yeah. It's interesting to see. We'll see what happens with her. But for the most part, the quality of her life has significantly improved in a very, very short period of time. And we didn't do this with tricks or therapy, or there wasn't catharsis. She wasn't placed in any kind of situation where pain or fear was induced. She simply was given the opportunity to be within herself in a way that's already inherent within her, and to have that inherent quality become available. Yeah.
And does she, sorry, does anyone else want to ask a question? But does she, after having all these lessons and stuff, does she realize
She's only had
the
5.
change in herself?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. She can reflect. The lessons are strong enough. The reflection is strong enough. She can know when she's in and when she's out, and she has the means to return to a sense of composure. You can't go from here at my house, drive out to your house, get in the car with your husband, and have your husband take you on a drive into a congested area without you going into and out of, but having, unless something has become really profoundly intact within her. She has to know how to continue to have this go in and out. So the quality of the gravitas of the lesson has to be enough that the value of it is worth keeping. And the distinction, in other words, if I've said this before and I'll say it, I mean, I think people get up all the time from awareness through movement lessons in a profoundly calm, collected, quiet place. Yeah, I think that they really, really are in a profound place when they get up. And don't know what to do with it, and don't know the value of it. They don't know that particular kind of serenity is of profound value, especially in this day and age. Yeah. And if they went to a retreat, a yoga retreat, and they spent days, hours doing yoga asanas and meditating and having very long days, and they came out of the retreat with that same sense of serenity, it would be worth every single penny of their money. But to pay for an awareness through movement lesson or an FI lesson, and part of our job is we don't know how to contextualize the lessons as a transformative process in such a way that they understand it, that what's taking place is a profound value. And I work with that. I really, really work with that so that people will grasp this is improving the quality of your life. Yeah. And what is the quality of your life? How are you going to meet the complexity of your life? It's a very complex situation to be in a car, in the passenger seat of a car with lights going on around you, and you being in a place of reaction as opposed to you being collected in a way that your sense of well-being is not tarnished. Yeah. Now, I believe that this is very much in keeping with what the Feldenkrais method is, this as a transformational process. Is there someone else with a question? Thanks, Jane. Yeah, Anna, please, go ahead.
It's not so much a question, but just I think that what you say about, we said earlier about having that sense of self yourself, you're on your own, to be giving a lesson of this quiet sense of composure. I think it is really important. It is maybe more important than we even realize, because it made me think. I've been working with a woman who also had a very bad car accident, and we're working on many, many things, but what she always says when she comes to see me is that you're so relaxed, and it's so good just to be around you. And it's
Right.
not something that I was really, focusing on, that's what that effect, that can have such an effect. So, but when you say this, it makes me realize and understand what she's talking about.
Well, Moshe was very clear in this particular sense that he is the environment in which the lesson takes place. And so we create the environment, and that environment that we have within ourselves is the very essence of the way that we touch another person. All right, so
I'm sure
that's Ruby. I think our time is up.
Yeah, well, Jeff, I was just going to say, there's one more really important question, which is, how does this then move into helping people become practitioners? How is this approach gonna help in your new training?
Well, this is the very nature of the training, which is to find the means within ourselves, you know, to have the training process in and of itself examine these questions so that we understand ourselves as have our own kind of agency as practitioners. I mean, I think that our definition for so many years has been, again, to use gentle movement to help people move with greater ease. And this whole other question of what it means to be healthy, have the resources to meet complexity and uncertainty, and swim upstream. I think that's a question that we delve into. We delve into the question of what is emotional integrity, or excuse me, emotional dignity. Anybody who's had any kind of, that means all of us, any kind of emotional difficulty at any point in time of our life where we've had to protect ourselves in some kind of way, or there's some stress that we continue to place on ourselves for some kind of outcome, for a sense of well-being. As long as that's intact within us, we don't really know how to care for ourselves. So the question then is, how does the training lead us into the quality of understanding what caring for ourselves is? And when we ask the question of physical integrity, the physical integrity means to be able to meet the demands of the changing world in such a way that we can be in it gracefully, in a profoundly organized, integrated way. So that has to be, again, the nature of the work. That's what you know. The whole process of helping the practitioner find the composure within themselves, so that when they give a lesson, they're sitting in that space that meets the people in that way. So that's what I'm trying to do. The new training starting in October. If you haven't seen, you can look up Feldenkrais Training Academy and go through the website. And you think of you yourself, or you can think of someone some poor yoga practitioner who's hurt, or a physical therapist who wants something new in their life, or a massage therapist and think that this practice would be great for them. We'd always be happy to have your referrals. So I think it's time for us to bow out at 6:03. Does anybody was this useful for you? Could use, yeah? One little piece of feedback. Someone want to say something that, how it's helpful? We can wait. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I appreciate the reminder to congratulate people on the strategies that they're using. Because as a physical therapist, I was trained to fix people in the beginning. And Feldenkrais, you know, is always a very different approach. And this was a great reminder of that. So thank you.
Yeah, this woman was brilliant in what she concocted for herself. So, yeah. All right. Well, I hope this was helpful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.
It's excellent.
The recording will be up on the Feldenkrais Training Academy website soon. You'll receive information about that.
Thank you.